Hi, it's Jessie, your caffeinated bookworm. Thank you for watching. Today's review, the preview, is going to be on Polybius by Collin Armstrong, and a big thank you to NetGalley for providing a digital review copy of this book. Now, when I went into this, I was expecting like a Ready Player One meets Grady Hendrix, and if you've read anything of Grady Hendrix, you know what I'm talking about. You're expecting kind of that comic relief throughout the book almost. And it's actually posited on Goodreads as Stranger Things meets The Walking Dead. And neither one of those is really what it ended up being. The Goodreads synopsis really kind of pushes a romance aspect of the book, which is, I think, a failure on whoever wrote the synopsis's part, because it's not what this is. And yes, there is a little bit of an awkward attempt at a relationship between the two main characters, Andy and Ro, as well as their parents, Rachel and David. David is the town sheriff who is being ousted by the incoming crowd. It's basically a situation where Tasker Bay, which is where Andy and her mother have recently moved to, or moved to a couple of years ago. It's basically a town that is being gentrified. It's a fishing town. It's a small fishing town in Northern California, but you have these kind of upper class Silicon Valley types, real estate moguls taking an interest in the town. And so these people who are kind of moving in, they're kind of taking advantage of the people in Tasker Bay who are not doing so well financially. And there's a side story about a mom and pop store who has been there for a couple generations, being pushed out by these newer family who owns a store, but it's more of like a corporate type of store. Like, it's bigger, it's flashier, it's got more stuff. And because they have a different kind of business setting, they can sell their stuff for cheaper, which is kind of pushing the smaller mom and pop store out of business. And so there's a lot more going on to the story than just Andy and Ro and their attempt at a romance. I don't know why they did that on Goodreads, and it's just kind of ignore that. So Andy's mom, Rachel, left her father, Devin, a couple of years ago. She was trying to change Devin because Devin had, I guess, some mental issues. He was really smart. He was the one who got Andy into really loving the intricacies of computer building and of coding. And he taught Andy a lot of what she knows, and she adores her father. And it's one of those situations where the parents separate and the child doesn't really know the whole story, because Andy's mother, in the respectful way of doing things, has not really explained to Andy all the reasons why they got divorced. Why her parents got divorced. Because she doesn't want Andy disillusioned with her father. She doesn't want to be that mom who kind of whispers bad things about the dad to the kid to keep them from having a relationship with the dad. She doesn't want that. The problems that they had were between her and Andy's father, not between anything that Andy's father did wrong with Andy. And so Andy's kind of mad at her mom because she thinks that her mom was just trying to change her dad. And her goal is to not make any friends, not like the town, and get back to her father, who lives in Silicon Valley or San Jose or something, when she graduates. And so as soon as she can, she takes up a job at the local arcade. Now, Andy doesn't really play video games. And so she's not really taking an interest in the games that are out on the floor. She's just there to get some money so she can get back to her father as soon as she graduates. She hasn't made any friends. The people who have attempted to be friends with her, she's made it very clear that she doesn't want to talk to them. And so the sheriff, David, his son, Roman, I think his name is Roman, he goes into the arcade and he sees that Andy works there. And he is kind of taking an interest in Andy. Now, his mother died, and when his mother died, he kind of went into a kind of, I need social, I need a social pillow. And so he made a lot of friends. He joined all the extracurriculars. He joined all the sports. And so he was this really popular kid there for a while, in this small town. And then one day he just stopped. He quit all the extracurriculars. He quit all the sports. And it's just really been him and his best friend, Laurel, who used to be his girlfriend, since then. And the teachers and the counselors, they're like, okay, well, what's really going on? And I think in their heads, as far as, the between the lines part of the story with Roe is, I think they think that he's on drugs, or that he's joined in with a bad crowd or something like that. But his father is just kind of, he's just kind of feeling it out, trying to see exactly what's going on with Roe. Because after Roe's mother died, David was depressed, and it kind of helped that Roman went so into everything instead of going into like a depression. And so now that he's kind of backing away from that, David's not really sure where Roman's going with it, but he also doesn't want to assume the worst about his son. And so he just kind of lets him do his own thing. And so Roe goes into the arcade, and he's kind of had his eye on Andy for a while. He feels that they have a kind of kindred spirit. And so he tries to talk to her, and Andy, when she realizes that Roe is making an attempt at conversation with her, she's behind the counter, and she just kind of ducks down until he leaves. And it was amusing. And then the next person comes up to the counter, and they're like, "Are you going to help me?" And she's just like, "Give me a second." And when she jumps up back at the counter to help the next person in line, she kind of looks over at Roe, and he's looking at her, and they make eye contact. And Roe's friend Laurel is like, she was talking to you. She didn't talk to anybody. He's like, well, she wasn't really talking to me. I was talking to her, and then she kind of hid. But she's like, well, if you like her, you can't just stop right there. Like, you have to keep trying. And so Laurel kind of goes in with Roe to try to get Andy to socialize with them. She invites her to a party, and of course Roe turns her down. But in the midst of all of this, the arcade that she works at, which is run by a man named Mal, his name is Malcolm, but he goes by Mal, which is kind of on the nose because he's a bad man, and he kind of fancies himself as Tasker Bay's mob boss in his head. And Mal's a really interesting character. Even though he's a bad guy, you see this struggle within himself of, he views himself as this badass. He views himself as this, like I said, like a mob boss of Tasker Bay. And at some point, something happens, and he's embarrassed because he suddenly realizes that nobody thinks about him and nobody cares about him, and he's not as badass as he thought. And so he kind of has this struggle in himself when that happens. But he brings in a new game cabinet from an auction that he went to. And this game cabinet doesn't have the title of the game on it. It's just a white, it's got white sides. It doesn't have any graphics, nothing on it. And he tells Andy, hey, you got to paint this. It's got to draw people in, so they'll play. And he plays it himself, and he kind of loses time while he's playing it. And this is where you really start to see Mel start to change, is after he plays the game. And it happens over and over again. People start, it starts with a small crowd. There's a line of people. They put their quarters on the cabinet so that they can play next. And all of the people walk away. They kind of they look a little dazed. And then strange things start to happen in the town. People start getting violent, or they go into a state of almost catatonia, or they have nightmares and they're scared. And Andy's seeing this happen, and she's not really making the connection between the changes in personalities and the game just yet. And even Ro plays it. And when Ro plays it, he has the same reaction. He kind of gets dazed and he walks away. Later on, he's at home and he's waiting for his father to come home, and he has what I can only describe as a seizure. And he kind of blacks out and he starts having nightmares. But Andy isn't really affected by the game. And so this is why, she's having a problem, really putting into words why she's starting to think that it's the game that's making people change. Ro's friend Laurel also plays the game. And she's at her parents' store when she sees the wife of the owner of the other newer, flashier store come into their store. And she has this kind of waking dream of killing the woman. And she catches herself and she's like, that's not me. I don't know what happened. And she starts worrying herself. At one point, Andy, who has finally kind of started opening up to Ro because she sees something's going on and she doesn't really have anybody else to turn to. And yes, Ro's kind of cute and maybe she might have feelings for him. But when she tries to open up to him, he lets her explain herself. And he listens, but at the same time, he absolutely doesn't think that she has any, like, what she's saying doesn't make any sense. Like, how can a game be affecting people? And at some point, she takes out, she takes it apart, she pulls some of the code, and she puts it online. And this is 1982. And so to put it online, I mean, she's using Usenet, which is something that was made for educators and scientists, people in the government, but she puts it on a forum. And when she puts it on a forum, she gets a response a couple days later, and the person's like, you need to take that down and never put any of the code online again. Take the code down, take your post down, take the game down, destroy the game. Trust me on this. And so she's like, okay, obviously there's something there. And she tells Ro about it. And so they start to kind of look into it. Ro is not really wanting to believe her, but also he is continuing to have nightmares and he is continuing to have seizures. And so he knows that something went wrong. Now, Andy's mom, Rachel, is a doctor, but she's been doing I guess kind of home health. People come to her when they have problems, and she has seen this sudden influx of people who are like, I'm having nightmares, I'm paranoid, my child is having violent outbursts where they've never had violent outbursts before, and so on and so forth. And she's thinking it's something biological. And so she's trying to reach out to her friend in the CDC to see if something is going on. Well, I'm trying to figure out where to stop without getting too far into the story as to provide spoilers, because the book isn't out yet. And it was really, really good. There wasn't that comic relief that I was expecting, if it was going to go into like a Grady Hendrix kind of writing style. But there also wasn't zombies. It's not the Walking Dead. I was going to say the Grateful Dead. Okay. But it was a very, very interesting book, and it really kept me kind of pulled in. And there were times where I was like almost kind of, I was tense. And so it was almost like I was scared. Like, it's not a horror book, but it does have like intense thematic elements to it. And it was really, really good. It was better than I thought it was going to be. Now, it is coming out on April 29th. I am going to post this before then, but I really hope that you will check it out, because it was such an interesting thing. And like when you come to find out like the history behind Polybius, which is of course the game, it doesn't just go into like the people who made the game and the reasoning behind the game. It also goes back further than that. And if you know anything about mythology, maybe you've kind of run into the name Polybius before, and it just gets so fascinating from there. The author did a really good job tying it all together, making everything make sense. I just kind of feel like it could have been one of those books that was either like a duology, maybe, or a thicker book. But at the same time, I don't feel like he left anything out. I don't feel like there was any holes that were left open. He did a really phenomenal job, like tying everything together. I just, myself, because of the history, I just kind of wish that there was a little bit more. But that's just me. It works wonderfully as a standalone. And like I said, everything's kind of tied up at the end, and it is really interesting. So don't let the description on Goodreads kind of keep you away from this. It is really interesting. And even though it is probably more of a YA novel than an adult novel, I will say that there were adult elements to it. Not in the not in the romance sense, but in the adults are going to do the things that adults are going to do when they have addictions kind of sense. And it had a little bit of violence in it, especially concerning Mal, but it was really good. And so, like I said, don't let the synopsis on Goodreads keep you away. So I don't know if Collin Armstrong has written anything else. I haven't really looked into him. This is my first read by him, but I would definitely be interested in reading more, because after reading it, I have more of a Terry Miles feel after reading it than I do of a Grady Hendrix or anything along those lines. And if you like, Rabbits by Terry Miles is phenomenal. And this is not that. This is not Rabbits. But that's how I ended up feeling, was that this is more of a Terry Miles writer than a Grady Hendrix writer. So that's all I have to say about the book. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe below.